Chapter 1. Crocodile. "Get back in the boat, Lord Taharka! Back! You must be ready when he comes." The boy Taharka stood ankle deep in the thick black mud of the great river. It was hot, hot, hot. Not far away, across the lush green banks, the sun shimmered on sand and rock. The boy's skin, black as the rocks on the bank of the Nile, was protected by a loose white cloth that beat back the wicked rays. Already it was soaked with sweat. "He's slow, he's lazy," said the boy, though his heart was beating very fast. "Don't count on it. He can move like the rapids downstream and you won't hear a sound." For the first time in his 12 years, Taharka had been brought out on a crocodile hunt. The crocodile was sacred to Sebek, the crocodile god, of course, but that was all right, for Taharka was a prince. Not a very important prince, but a prince, one of the many sons of Shabaka, king of Cush, who ruled as a god in the Cushite city of Napata. He had no quarrel with Sebek. He had been taught that all the gods were his cousins, and was not really looking forward to the killing. But Mbuta had said it was a lesson, something that must be learned. "Don't play games," said Mbuta grimly. "This isn't the day for it." Mbuta was his uncle, once a slave, now a high captain in the army. Taharka had always followed his orders without question, so now, heat or no heat, he got back in the boat. He leaned back to gaze at the shimmering blue sky, at the water birds passing overhead. A flock of storks beat by, upriver from the great sea of the north, so far away that he did not believe it really existed, though his own grandfather had once seen it. He bowed his head in respect as the sacred ibis skimmed majestically by. "Look!" said Mbuta. Taharka's heart jumped, for he thought that the crocodile had come. But it was the kingfisher, hovering still as death above them. It dove as he watched, plummeting down like a rock from the sky. The three of them, Taharka, Mbuta, and Net the boatman, watched spellbound, as if it had been the first time they had seen it. So they did not realize that the crocodile was really there. He had come swiftly, as Mbuta had warned, only his dark green back showing above the water. He was very hungry and very silent, and the first they knew of his presence was the shock to the boat as he struck it with his tremendous tail. And then the scream. A heart-chilling scream, despairing and wild. Net, the boatman, had fallen into the water. Taharka had once seen a condemned criminal thrown to the crocodile. He had often dreamt of it, but this was real. This was Net. There was only one thing to do. He scrambled to the spot from which Net had fallen, seizing the spear within its iron head. Mbuta was shouting at him, "No, Lord, no! Let him go! Get back!" Sebek was already upon the boatman. Those terrible teeth were closing on his arm. Taharka struck the beast with the spear and, at the same time, saw the water redden with blood. Net's or the crocodile's, he didn't know which. But the flat head was driven aside. And suddenly Sebek had turned on him. The great jaws opened wide as in his dreams, ready to seize and crush him and drag him down. Something struck him and threw him flat. The jaws had snapped shut, but on the empty air. Mbuta was leaning over the side, his powerful hands clamped around the ugly snout, squeezing it shut. "The spear! The spear! Remember what I taught you!" His great muscles were trembling. The sweat was pouring down his arms. Suddenly, Taharka was very calm. He grasped the spear, positioning his hands just as Mbuta had shown him. He fixed his eyes on the thrashing back of the beast, on the spot where the spear must enter, at the base of the ugly head. He drove down the spear. The waters churned. There was a great cry from Mbuta, thrown back into the bottom of the boat. Then the waters were dyed red as Taharka had never imagined, and began to grow still. They dragged the boatman over the side. Blood was spurting from an ugly wound in his arm where the beast's teeth had grazed him. He was trembling with pain and shock. Taharka could see that the man might bleed to death. He knew a little of what must be done. All the children of the god were instructed in the sacred medicine at their scribe school. The formulas, the prescriptions, the magic spells. The bleeding must be stopped with a tight binding above the wound. "I can stop the bleeding," Taharka said. "How? We have no cloth," said Mbuta. Without thinking, Taharka tore off the fine cotton cloth, the sacred cloth, so it was said, that shielded him from the sun. He looked defiantly at Mbuta. Mbuta was silent. Taharka hesitated, holding it out to the aging warrior, for Mbuta had stanched the blood of many battle wounds. Mbuta shook his head. "Try your skill," he said. "You've come this far. Finish it." Taharka gritted his teeth. He was frightened. The man's life might depend on what he did. He grasped the wounded arm, feeling for the spot where the terrible spurting must be stopped. And suddenly he was no longer afraid. He could do it. Blood was life. But after all, it was only blood, and if you stopped the leak, it couldn't get out. It must be tight enough. He needed something to twist with. He broke off a stalk of reed. He knotted the cloth in place. The man lay in the boat, still shaking and moaning. Now that it was over, Taharka found that he was shaking too, but somehow he had never felt better in his life. Mbuta examined the dressing. It will hold. It wasn't as bad as I thought. They were no longer alone. Several of the small reed boats had pulled up close, drawn by the shouts and the cries. Men with nets and wooden spears hunting for waterfowl. They stared at the boy with the emblems of the royal clan of Napata on his thin breast. They whispered together. Mbuta pointed one of them out. "You," he nodded toward the injured boatman, "take his place." The fowler, without question, scrambled over the side. "Away!" Mbuta shouted at the others. "What are you looking at? How dare you lift your eyes to a son of the god?" As they pulled away, Taharka heard one of them mutter, "A son of the god! He has broken the taboo. He has laid hands on a slave. He has bound his wound with the sacred cloth." Under the burning sun, Taharka felt suddenly cold. The taboo. The law. His flesh was not mortal flesh, he had been taught. His very clothing must not be defiled. He had forgotten about that. What would they do to him when they found out? But he knew that, even if there had been time to think, he would have done the same. "I had to do it," he said to Mbuta. "I know. And, you being you, I couldn't have stopped you. Hold your head up and be ready for punishment if it comes. Don't think about it now." And, on the way back to the city, he tried not to think about it. Tried to think about the approach to Napata, which he loved, with its great temple and towering tombs. The air had already begun to hum with voices. The scattered huts along the riverbank thickened into clusters stretching as far as he could see. After a while they came to a quay, and the fowler moored the boat. A chariot was waiting, the driver standing patiently beside it. Behind him stood another man with the solemn, self-important air of an official. But Taharka thought that he looked anxious, even a little frightened. He waited while Mbuta ordered a longshore man to take the injured boatman to one of the huts. Then he spoke. "The Lord Taharka is commanded to appear at once in the great hall of the god." For a moment, Taharka couldn't move. Had they found out about the sacred cloth already? But the man spoke again. "All the children of the great house are summoned. The god is dying."